sooner you do that, the less chest pains you'll have when that reality comes.
Hi guys, welcome to Context Corner. I'm your host, Umali Antimayapi, and this is our second episode. Now I know this took long, but that's only because I was trying to find some magic, and I'm sorry for the husky voice again. I just have flu. Now with that said, we can get into it. Oh, before we get into it, guys, I have a question which I'm gonna put in a questionnaire under this episode there on Spotify. Please interact with it. The question is, how do you feel about human rights being subject to change depending on who is in power? Now, as you listen to the whole podcast, you can be thinking about it and then maybe you can answer me. Just type that in when you're done listening. Now, in my intro, I did say that this podcast is about looking at how systems and social constructs affect us and our daily lives. Now, when I speak political systems, I'm speaking about democracy, a monarchy, an authoritarian, dictatorship, oligarchy, communism, colonialism, socialism. There's just a bunch of government systems. Now, democracy is a system of government in which a state power is vested in the people or the general population of the state. A monarchy is a political system in which power resides in a single family that rules from one generation to the next. Now, I do know South Africa is familiar with democracy, monarchy, and being colonized. And I do know that we have had a few African leaders try to pursue socialism and communism. I do know that Chris Hani was interested in communism. So that's what he believed could work for South Africa. But yeah, we are now a democratic country. Now we're voting this year on the 29th of May, and people keep saying 2024 is our 1994. 1994 is the year in which South Africa got its universal suffrage. It's a year where all of us were allowed to vote despite of our race or gender. And for this to happen, it was made possible by a referendum which was voted in 1992 on the 17th of March. This was a referendum that pushed for the end of apartheid, and around that time it was limited to only white voters because only white people could vote back then. And it was started by the president F.W. de Klerk in 1992, years before the referendum. Now, I'm sure you're wondering what a referendum is. A referendum is a general vote by the electorate on a single political question that has been referred to them for a direct decision. An electorate refers to all the people in a country or area who are entitled to vote in a decision. Now, white people at this time had a referendum to stop apartheid, and they voted it in. It stopped, and then in 1994, universal suffrage was introduced, and we could all vote. Now, we will take a look at a few things that have happened when we did not have an opportunity to vote, where all decisions were made for us without us or without asking us. We have South Africa formally achieved its independence from Britain on the 31st of May 1910. General Louis Botha formed a government as a prime minister on that day. And then in 1909, there was the South African Act, which was sort of a unification of all the British colonies that were in South Africa. This act unified the Cape, Natal, Transvaal, and the Orange River. Now, this was when, in 1910, from 1910 to 1961, the Union of South Africa was a self governing country that shared a monarch with the United Kingdom and other dominions of the British Empire. So, like I said, this was when South Africa was under a monarchy. And then there was a time in 1936 where white unity made possible for two-thirds parliamentary majority need to change the constitution. The result was the Representation of the Natives Act of 1936, which ended the limited access by blacks to voting, which had begun the previous century. So in 1854, they had allowed black people in the Cape to vote. But with this representation of Natives Act of 1936, that all changed. So instead, blacks in the Cape Province were allowed only to vote for three white representatives in parliament. Then blacks throughout the rest of the country were restricted to indirect elections for four whites in the Senate, the upper review body of the parliament. They didn't even trust us in making decisions for ourselves. Anything which had to do with the Native Act, the Native, anything Native. I don't know why they kept naming us natives. But yeah, we can also look at the Natives Land Act, which was a time where we were given 7% of the land, which later became 13% of the land. Mind you, we are the majority in South Africa, but then it was decided that we did not need that much land or not own any land for that matter. So, this is what happens when you don't have a choice when decisions are made. You don't have an opinion when decisions are made. Decisions are made for you despite how they may affect you. Now, in a democratic system, you have a voice. You can vote for whoever you put in power. And okay, I don't think you have a choice on what they do. We thought Ramaphosa was a billionaire, but hey, yeah. So we have a choice to vote people in power, but we may not have power on what they decide to do when you're in power. So in South Africa, we have the IEC, the Electoral Commission of South Africa, and it is a commission that administers voting here in South Africa, and only voters who are registered can vote. Now you have to be 16 years to register to vote, but to go and vote, you have to be 18 years or older. We have the national, provincial, and municipal elections. The national and the provincial elections take place every 5 years. And then the municipal elections happen 2 years after that. And we pride ourselves in our constitution. We keep saying our constitution is the best in Africa. But now we're looking at a time where in 1936, if you have two-thirds parliamentary majority, you can change the constitution. That is still applicable even now. The constitution is subject to change depending on the majority rule. And now that a lot of us don't want to vote, and we don't want to vote because we believe that even if we vote, there is not going to be any change. The more we are reluctant to vote, the people who believe in their own parties will keep voting for their parties. So, in the end, it might result in this two-thirds majority happening because we are not really voting, and anyone who believes in their party will be voting for their own party. Um, when you vote, you are voting for a political party and not an individual. So, as we are about to vote this year, it is important that you do research about the party that you are about to vote for. You think about who is in charge of this party, who is funding this party. You read the manifestos so that you know what they will be bringing to the table. Knowing who funds the party gives you an idea of whose interests that party is willing to protect. Um, the constitution places all elections and referendums in the country in all spheres under the control of the IEC. This was established in terms of the Electoral Commission Act of 1996. Now, this act has been amended a few times. So you must also check that out. So after South Africa became a union in 1960, from 1910 to 1961. In 1961, South Africa was then declared a republic. Now, again, things change depending on who is in power. So when we were declared a republic, we changed our currency from a pound to a rand. I also believe that 1961 was sort of a critical year for for South Africa because when this happened, the very same year, the Pan African Congress was established that year in September. The ANC military wing, namely Mkhonto we was also established later that year in November. Now you have to understand that as black people, when things were imposed on us, laws and so forth, we could not vote them out. Not even a protest would help. And it was Human Rights Day yesterday, and we all know what happened. Sharpeville massacre. That was a peaceful protest. So the fact that we couldn't even protest, it led to things like these political parties and the military wing of the ANC, which is the MK, being born. We were trying to find different ways to have our voice heard. And now we are in 2024, where all you have to do is go and vote to have your voice heard. Now, I'm disappointed to say that I myself, I, yeah, boy, and it's going to be my first time voting. And that's because I did not have any knowledge, or was rather not interested in voting, that I felt like, okay, let me sleep. Other people go and vote. And when you read these historical books, you realize that these young men and women that fought for our freedom were just in their teens and 20s and early 30s. And they did so much for us only because they were politically educated. And we are a generation that is not only politically uneducated or uninformed, we are also uninterested and ignorant. And we also have our own issues. We have the femicide rate going up. We have 18 million South Africans relying on grants, which means poverty is on top of the roof. We have crime going up like crazy. And these are things that should push us to vote and try to change the system that is there right now or who is in power right now and try to find someone that can fix what we're going through. But I don't, I believe that we haven't found that push, that momentum. We don't have it yet, that push that pushes us to go and vote. And back then were all going through the same thing. So the struggle was the same and the goal was the same. Hence, working together was easier. But now, with some black people having it better than others, we no longer have the same goal. And even the parties that we would choose to vote for this year after reading their manifestos, every black person right now, it's every man for himself, and that's because we are no longer in the same struggle. So everybody's gonna vote for a party that they believe that works for them. But now, if you look at Cape Town, for example, we have the same party governing the whole province, but city areas have it better than townships. And so, if you are a voter that lives in the township, you may vote for a different party. But if you're a voter that lives in the city, you may continue to vote for the party that works for you. And I'm saying that the struggle is no longer the same. And now, back then, you'd all know that privilege was for white people. But now there are black people that live in privilege and it benefits them. And they continue to uphold certain certain things that push their own interests. And because we have lost Ubuntu along the way with what we went through in South Africa, now everybody can only think about what benefits them. But I would just like to remind you guys that we are all on the same boat. And while you might have it easier, you sort of have family members that have it harder. And if you don't make life easier for them, it's gonna get harder for you. Um, it's important that we all go and vote this year. We all make our voices heard because we finally have a voice. All of these laws, acts, and everything are people that just sit down and decide, and then they vote on it, and then they pass it and it goes through. And so I believe that on the 29th of May, it is us as the whole country sitting down and deciding what is best for us as a country and how we can go forward. Because we have been through a lot. The ANC has had power from 1994 till now. It's been thir- 30 years. And in the 30 years that they've had power, we had hoped that they would reverse certain effects of the apartheid system and maybe certain effects of even before. But they did try here and there, but we are still dancing in the same place. And unfortunately, there's a lot of corruption which leads to only a few benefiting and not all of us benefiting. Because there may be policies that the government does push for us to try and be better. But because there's a lot of corruption, it ends up not happening, which is why we still sort of dance in the same place for 4 years. So we have, for me, I don't want to give power back to white people. They have ruled us for more than 30 years. And I know ANC has disappointed us for 30 years. But white people have had us for more than 30 years and they did us dirty. So it's time to give a different party a shot. And it's time for us to see new ideas and new people. And it's time for the youth to take everything seriously. It's time for the youth to jump on the ship and we push this. With the way that EFF won most campuses last year, I'm hopeful because I can see that there is a certain few in our generation that is politically interested, even if I am not sure about the reasons. But I am proud that we have a few people that are pushing political education and a change. We have to get the youth involved in politics. And the reason why we are watching all these old men in parliament, it's because they believe that they sweat hard for the seats that they have now. It's what they went through during apartheid. I think that's why it's easy for them. Every time when we have to vote, they manipulate us and tell us that they did this and that and that and that. I mean, Zuma was in the MK for God's sake. So it's easier for us to believe in him when he comes back now. But we need to give new ideas a shot. But in order to have new and fresh ideas, we need the youth to get into politics and be given a voice and be given a chance to push and try groundbreaking stuff. And maybe we can get somewhere. So sitting here and complaining about ESCOM, about water, about everything is not gonna help us. But us standing up and voting will help us. And I mean, all we have to do is go and vote. It's not like I'm asking you to join the MK and Sihambe Siolwa Tanzania. It's not like I'm asking you to join the Sharpeville massacre protest. It's not like I'm asking you to join the 1976 student protest. A lot has happened, and the people who did not have the chance to vote things out, they fought for what we have now. And all we have to do is vote for the next generation to have it better than we do. Because we also had a generation before us fight for us to have it better than they did. The education that you have now, is important. Um it was Human Rights Day yesterday. I would have decided to speak on the Sharpeville massacre, but I am still reading the book on Robert Sobukwe, who led that march. The book is written by Benjamin Pogrand, and it's called "How Can Men Die Better?" And it's such an interesting read, and we don't even have a voice recording of Mr. Sobukwe, and that's because he was not allowed to speak and he was not allowed to do a lot of things. And that's all because of that 1960 match. And in the book, he also speaks on certain universities being open to black people. So all we have now, the education, the money, the everything that we think we have better now is privilege. You are really living your ancestors' wildest dream, but they had to fight for it for you to get it. And unfortunately, this year is another year where we have to fight for the next generation to have it better than we do. Because it can happen that in 2024 we are still tackling poverty like never before. We are still donating stuff like pads. A South African household cannot afford something as small as sanitary pads or groceries to the point where you have to earn like 350 grants from the government per month to sustain yourself, which even this 350 is not enough to sustain yourself. So don't be swayed and end up voting for the NC because they gave you 350. No, how is that going to help you in the long run? So this is just me um encouraging you guys to vote and saying I'm not saying things will change overnight. Like after you vote, success will be millionaire. No, but this is the first step to change. It is voting for a party that you believe can can change the situation that we're in now. A party that has outlined policies in their manifestos and they're pushing for a better South Africa. And yeah, God bless South Africa, man. And that's it from me. Please do not forget to answer that the question that I asked when we started. I will have it under the episode so that you can just type in your answer. Well, that's it from me and Context Corner. Until next time, thank you for listening and getting this far.